So my name is Marsha-Gaye. I am a partnership marketing manager for CBC Sports and Olympics. I'm also the founder of Black in Sport Business, BSB, and I teach at George Brown in the Sport and Event Marketing Program. So I'm a busy person, which is good. It's all good. My background in the sport event industry, I've been in this space for over 10 years. I originally came from the US because I was on a scholarship in the States and moved to Canada after I graduated. I wasn't exactly sure about where in the sport world I wanted to end up, but I ended up going to George Brown and it helped me get an idea of the sport business space and how to navigate there. So I completed the 1 year course and started working my way from agency to working on client side with Rogers to working at the league for the NHL. And then now I'm at CBC. So it's been quite a journey in between, but I consider myself as a professional now in this space, having acquired that experience. And I'm grateful for the different opportunities and paths that I've had leading up to this point. SB, more than anything, is to create a community of Black sport business professionals, which never existed before, which I found odd. After my experiences in the space, I always thought I was the only one. I've always seen just me, especially as a Black female in the space. So I thought that creating an environment that cultivates the mind, the knowledge sharing, and the good relationships that we need in this space was necessary. So BSB was created to bring similar minds together, have us think through things, have us share thoughts, have us share experiences, and that's how we grow. So it was more so about being able to have a platform, a safe space for these Black professionals to kind of unload some of our personal experiences as we grow in the profession and be able to help the young people who are coming into the space to understand the different pitfalls that they might experience, the different opposition that they might have, and how to best navigate those to avoid a lot of the instances that we have experienced as professionals in the space. One of the most challenging things about it would be two things for what I've realized so far, is that one, a lot of people see Black BSB as a talent pool, which is amazing because that's what we really want. We're like trying to be a Rolodex of Black talent in the sport business space. Fantastic. But now it's like we'll become a check mark in the sense where people come to us to say we've checked there for talent, but they continue with their regular hiring practices. So we don't always get into the door as much as we'd like to do. So that's something that we have to be mindful of and work on in terms of holding organizations accountable in how they hire and actually hire diverse talent. And the next thing I would say as a challenge would be raising awareness to let people know that BSB exists. So organizations know that we are around, we are kind of pooling our talent together, and we have people who have such a diverse experience in the space within our database that we can reach out to. So if they ever need talent for any reason to hire diverse, to improve their diverse experiences or diverse talent base, then we're here and we exist for that. The first thing that we need to acknowledge is the discrepancy that exists between diversity in certain sports on the field and then when you get into the offices and the board positions. We can't expect to move forward as a sport community if we don't acknowledge the fact that this is actually happening. So we have talent who's diverse. Let's say we talk about the ones that we see all the time, the prominent ones, the MLSCs and their teams. And then when you look in the boards, you look behind the doors, you don't see that diversity inside from a talent-based perspective. Representation matters because people don't know if they can't see it, they can't be it. People need to know that they can do these things. And if I don't see, coming into the space, I didn't see any other Black females except myself working in these spaces. So I literally had to just go off a blueprint in my mind of what that would be. And even now, in creating BSB, I've found other Black females in the sports space, but not necessarily in the sponsorship marketing space where I exist. So it's always been interesting to be able to try and navigate blindly. And you're going into rooms and going into spaces where you don't know if you can be your whole self, your authentic self, your real self, because you're not represented in those spaces and the environments aren't conducive for your personal and professional development. So I think one of the things that we need to do as a community is put people put people of color, put people of diverse thought. It's not just diverse of looks and feels, but diverse in thought in these positions where people can see them, where they can actually influence change. We need to change the leadership of some of these organizations so we know that, because they always have a saying that the fish rots from the head. And you can't expect anything to happen on a leadership thing and not have it trickle down to what's happening at the lower level. So being able to have diversity in terms of women representation, BIPOC representation in decision-making positions, and having it down to senior management, lower management, entry level, having that diversity come all the way through the pipeline, it's important because now you're having these voices and these thoughts heard in spaces where they should be, where decisions can be made. You can't expect somebody who does represent the community to give input into something if they're never there. And the community of Toronto on a whole is so diverse in terms of newcomers, immigrants, people who have been here, like all these different things. And everybody should have a say in how we represent ourselves. So not only our community, but to the world. So if those voices are not there, they're not represented. That means they're not being seen in the larger picture. So that's important for us to be able to put people in the right places from entry level all the way to the top, and seeing that communication and that representation trickle down, and it will always disseminate into the community, into the product, into how we hire staff, into how we bring athletes on board, because those voices are being heard and seen in those spaces. The shift that I would like to happen is, I'm optimistically saying, is in progress. It's not something I've ever experienced working in the industry. The industry has never shifted. The industry has always been the same. Anything that has happened pre-2020 has been an institution. And now everything that's happening post-2020 has been as a result of a shift, as we had said. So prior to 2020, it was just a status quo. You don't see people like you in the space. You don't expect to rise above a certain level in terms of your ascension in organizations. And now that people are realizing that, oh, wow, this is really a problem, which even though we as people of color would know that for a long time, but we've unfortunately had come to accept it as status quo. Now that we've had this chance to have these difficult conversations, well, not everybody, but most of us have had the chance to have these difficult conversations and realize that there are flaws in the system, I am hoping that the shift can result in the change that is needed in the space to make it better. The space can be better, it can be more rich, it can be more lucrative, and that shift can enhance that. That shift can be that catalyst, but it needs to be able to be embraced well, and it needs to be taken in a space where it is not just one-sided, it has to be full encompassing. So I am hoping, based on my peers' experience in the space, that now when I go into an organization, I'm not the only one. Know that when I go in anywhere, I'm not the first. I'm tired of hearing the first. Oh, first. That needs to stop. It needs to become normalized to have women in spaces. It needs to become normalized to have women of color in spaces. And we need to get used to people being able to aspire to things because they have a passion for it, and being able to say, I can get there regardless of how they look or what their gender is or whatever it might be. And that shift has begun, and I'm hoping it can continue. But prior to that, it was something that I never saw happening until this last year. Most difficult part of creating diversity in sport, first and foremost, there needs to be an acknowledgement that something is wrong. You cannot change anything without acknowledging that something needs to be changed. For me, from where I stand, sport has the opportunity to lead so many industries in making this change. Because sport is, I've always said that there are only two universal languages, sport and music. Those are unification tools. They unify people, religion, gender, class, race. It doesn't matter. Sport has the ability to bring people together. And sport needs to be that example. Sport needs to lead the way and say, if we can exemplify what we expect people to be, when you go to a Raptors game, Blue Jays game, whatever game it is, you see everybody and they're connected by the power of sport. Sport needs to now take that power from the game and the experiences and transform it throughout who they are and what they embody, and be able to say, we are going to make sure that representation is, like I said before, from top to bottom, and not just in certain spaces, and not just on the field, or not just at the counters, or not. It needs to be representative from top to bottom, because we need to show, we have the ability now to show the world the power of diversity, the power of inclusion. And I think as a sport community, we would really miss the mark if we do not take this bull by the horns and step into this as we should, and own it as we should, and show finance, and show hospitality, and show all the other spaces the power of the unification of sport, and exemplify it from top to bottom. I think that's something that people have always not really used sport to its full potential. And I think that's one thing that people in the sport industry have missed. And now this is our chance to actually be that beacon of light in this space, to be like, listen, if we can work together and get and win a championship for a city, we can work together and make great organizations, make great experiences, build brands together. We can do more for our community and make it something powerful. And sport has the power to do that. It is very, very important. Children do not come out of their womb expecting to hate anything. That's trained behavior. And I think as adults and parents, it is our responsibility to ensure that we're creating people that can then grow up and create environments that we would want them or other children to be a part of. It is important for us to pour the best into these children, and showing them that you need to judge a person not for what they look like, but for who they are. Instilling values in them, instilling characteristics that are wholesome and things that make them better people. We need people now who are better people. We've all seen these keyboard warriors who say the most on comment boxes, and you're like, who are your parents? That's always the first question, like, who raised you? We need to make sure we don't raise those people. And it's important for people to understand that it starts with how you see life. And even if you don't agree with certain things, it's important for you to pour into the next generation better than what you have. Because our job now is to make sure we leave the world in a better state for the next generation. So pouring in those values of openness, authenticity, giving us a chance to be tolerant and accepting, and not brooding hate and angst and discrimination against each other. It only benefits us, because I think, as COVID has shown everybody, humans desire connection innately. And for us to discriminate against each other, and for us to be unempathetic, is not, I feel, innately human. So we need to make sure that whenever we're raising children, and even if you're not a parent, but you're around children, that you're pouring the good values into them. So when they are older, they can then do the same and pour good values into others, because it needs to just continue going that way, because we can't expect them to do something that they've never been taught. The acknowledgement. I said it before, sport has to acknowledge that they haven't lived up to, the sport industry as a whole has not lived up to the facade of inclusion and diversity that they like to portray at all levels, from amateur to professional, and being able, and there's still some sports that don't have the necessary representation. And a lot of it has to do with resources and other socioeconomic challenges. And we have the chance to change that narrative for so many people. But we need to take that level of acknowledgement. We need to see the problem. We need to understand that it is a problem, and we need to come to the consensus that something needs to be done about said problem. Acknowledgement and accountability go hand in hand. And if you don't acknowledge something, you can't be held accountable to it, which is why some people don't do it. But being able to say, this is a problem, I see this, and I realize that something is wrong, and then working together to cultivate the environment that makes that change and shifts the dial on that, That's what the sport industry needs. Yes, what is done and cannot be undone. But now moving forward, what will we do? What's the change that we're going to make? What's the difference that we're going to bring to this environment to make sure that 10 years from now, 15 years from now, we're not having the same conversation? We need to make sure that when we stand up and look through and look back, we can say, yes, this was the issue in 2020. And now in 2040, this is no longer an issue. This is a non-issue because we've moved the dial. And I think that's the important part, that the acknowledgement and then working with accountability to move forward and seeing what we can do for the future. Accountability allows us to see that, yes, things aren't the way they should be, but now we're holding ourselves to the standard of change. And it's important. Being able to say that I see this and I want to do something about it is something that very few people have had the chance to do in their lives. And I think it's a unique opportunity that we're all standing here facing to be able to change the narrative on D&I in the sports business space. Being able to be a person of color, a woman of color, who's an immigrant, who loves sport, and being able to share that with other people, that came out of a level of accountability. And I think a lot of people have that within them. And accountability is the staple that we're going to use to make sure that more people get the opportunities that they desire. And it's not limited or segmented to a certain demographic based on their privilege or based on their network or based on whatever. We open up those doors to give other people the chance to live out their desires as well. For diversity. So for diversity and inclusion, I'm going to answer at the same time. So the saying is, diversity is inviting everybody to the party and inclusion is asking somebody to dance. Yes, having diversity is important. We've established that. We need to have the representation. We need to see it. Inclusion, though, is something different. Bringing me into the space, but not including me, that's something else. That's a whole different conversation, because the differences that we have, we can't escape. But those differences should not be the reason why I feel exiled. They should be embraced, and I should be okay with celebrating our differences. We have different experiences, we have different backgrounds, different cultures, different whatever it might be. But no one should be made to feel less than because it's different. And that's what inclusion does. Diversity brings the people together. Inclusion makes them work together, right? So giving everybody a space at the table, giving everybody a chance to be heard, and letting them know that their experiences matter and that they're adding value, creating an environment of comfort and authenticity, because there are environments I've been in where they bring me there, great, diversity check, but I don't feel like I belong there. Inclusion, no go. And that in itself can has so many negative repercussions for a person in terms of their output, in terms of their emotional and mental well-being. I don't think people understand what it feels like when you get into an environment where they welcome you in, but you know you don't belong there. It's damaging, and we need to take accountability of the environments that we bring diversity hires into. And that's why the sport environment needs to understand more about each other. They need to understand more about what we bring to the table and know that inclusion is a key piece in giving everybody the chance to excel and create an environment where we can all grow and grow together well. So yes, diversity, absolutely, bringing people together, but inclusion is making sure everybody feels like they belong there. And I think those are the two things that work really well hand in hand, but you can have diversity on its own, but it won't sustain without inclusion. So first things first, we have come to a point now where we are at the cusp of a shift, of a transient piece. And we want to be able to ensure that 10 years from now, we've literally held ourselves accountable to the changes that we want to see. We have to acknowledge that the sports space has not been as diverse as it could be. And now we're going to take the steps necessary to ensure that it is moving forward. We want to have representation at all levels of decision making, to touch points, to everything on the field. For athletes, we want to be able to see that things all things are possible. Yes, there are other external barriers, but or race and those things that we can't control should not be factors in those equations. So we want to be able to create a space of diversity. We want to be able to create a space of inclusion, and we want to know that representation matters and our voices are being heard, and we're seeing those conversations roll out. As I said before, sport is a unification tool, and we have a chance now to turn the sport community into an example of how diversity and inclusion can work for all other spaces. And this is our chance to do so in a very positive way. Acknowledgement and accountability are important, because when you acknowledge something, you're validating somebody's experiences and you're validating the fact that things have not been the way they should be. And now we're taking account to be able to make sure moving forward it can be. And I think those are the major points that we wanted to share in terms of that, because it's important to make sure that the sport community creates the environment for leaders to thrive, for people to know that they can achieve, and for us to be able to say we've created a space where, irregardless of what you look like, where you're from, what you sound like, what your hair looks like, whatever it might be, you have a chance to succeed in this space fairly if you work hard and you're able to display your passions, because that's what sport is all about, being able to convey your passions in this way. And sport should be that environment where it could happen for anybody who desires it for that to happen for them.